So, all right, recording in progress. So I would like to say thank you very much to Frank for joining us this morning and to Tom for connecting us about this awesome nano learning and the information that he's going to share with us. And Frank has over 30 years of experience in all kinds of amazing things. Sorry. He's been a trainer, a speaker, a talent development professional for over those 30 years. And he's a serial entrepreneur, which I thought was a really fun way to describe things, having founded several different businesses and different companies in Iowa. So excellence in training, corporation, geo-learning, positions, and easy peasy videos. I hope I said that right. That looks like how it should be said. I love it. And he's had lots of awards, including CEO of the Year by the Technology Association of Iowa and Entrepreneur of the Year by the Des Moines Business Record, and then Small Business Person of the Year by the U.S. Small Business Association. So huge thank you to Frank for joining us. He is going to discuss our topic for today, and that is nano learning, and show us how to create and incorporate some of these new things into the training programs that we do. So Frank, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And I'm going to hand things over to you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate being here. And thanks everybody for joining this morning on a Friday morning. Really appreciate it. Everybody getting up and participating on what appears to be a stormy morning. I'm going to share my screen right now and share my PowerPoint presentation. We'll see if this works. As we always say, technology is great when it works. So hopefully you're seeing not the presentation view. I'll put that in right now. And let me turn on my chat here so I can see people's comments and everything else. So again, I want to thank Melissa. I want to thank Tom for recommending that I participate in this particular session. I've always been a huge fan of ATD, participated when I did live in Des Moines. We have our offices in West Des Moines there, and it's a fantastic organization, a great networking organization. So there's a shout out to ATD, and I want to support Melissa's effort. If you can spare any time and participate in these special interest groups or anything to devote your time, as Tommy was saying when he was commenting earlier, there's a younger generation of training and development professionals out there that need mentoring and help, and this is a great way for everybody to get it. So today's topic that I want to talk about, why less may be more. If you participate in RAGBRAI, which I have done many, many times, and love the great bike ride across Iowa. There's an old term in biking or bicycling, you may know. It's sort of like the less weight you have, the more advantage that you have. So the same, I think, can be applied to learning and development. Today, we are using technologies that we didn't have access to even a year or two ago. And I want to share some of that with you. I know Melissa mentioned that I'm a serial entrepreneur, and sometimes people come to me. I know last night, I think they had the Prometheus Awards. I don't know if anybody here participated in that. If you did, you can kind of show me in the little chat section there, but we were big supporters of, obviously, the Technology Association of Iowa too, and what they do, but I know they had their award ceremonies last night. So a special thing about learning and development technology, sometimes people come to me and say, Frank, how do you know when you're going to start a new venture or a new business, where the next big thing is going to be? Like, what is going to be the new hot, technology or approach to learning, coming up? And I have a very simple answer to that. And my answer is simply, I actually go and I look at what young teenagers, even in junior high school, what they're doing, what tools they're using, and what technology they're using. And my simple observation is those people are going to be entering the workforce. Those kids are going to be entering the workforce soon, just like Gen Zs are. And now we have Generation Alpha, which is the COVID generation, if you will. And I try to see what's hot with them. And then I see, is there an application that we can make in talent development that might apply? So when those workers are ready to come into the workforce, organizations are going to be prepared with the latest technology to communicate with them and educate them. So that's kind of one of the little secrets that I try to share about how I know what the next big thing is. So even though I have this little agenda here and it looks, daunting, please, please, please feel free to just ask any question at any time. I really would love this to be, a question and answer dialogue kind of thing. But quickly, what I'll try to cover today in the next about 50 minutes and open it up for questions is, what is nano learning? What is the definition of it? What do we mean by that? And I have a particular little bend to it. I know that Melissa mentioned easy peasy videos. That's sort of Procision's approach to nano learning, and I'll share that with you. I also am going to talk about, a lot of times when we talk about these new ways of communicating, how many people out there, show me in the chat or raise the hand or something like that, how many people basically look at TikTok or use Instagram, and like I do sometimes, you get into that little scroll thing where you go through and watch those short videos. Can anybody show me? Ah, there you go. Debbie does it. I know Debbie, yes. Let's see, who do we have? Penelope, got it, Instagram. So some people have preferences. Some like TikTok, some like Instagram, some like both of them or whatever. All right, yeah, that's good. All right. So we're going to talk about that. And my point in all of this is sometimes we just think these new technologies are just for the younger generation. But I have to admit, as a boomer, even last night I was up, when I get up at 3 a.m. in the morning, I'm sitting there scrolling through my TikTok and my Instagrams, looking at things. And I actually learn a lot by looking at those kinds of things. So we're going to talk about that. We'll also talk about how you can blend what I call OTS, or off-the-shelf content, or subjects and things like that, and user-generated content. So you can create your own, and we're going to talk about tools that you can use that are free or cost-effective, very cost-effective, and then how you might combine that with some of the off-the-shelf libraries that are out there. And so we have one, but also, big companies like LinkedIn Learning are now coming up with what they call nano tips. Has anybody looked at some of the nano tips on LinkedIn Learning and everything else, or seen other people who are now presenting these little short training messages? That's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And then we're going to talk about how you can apply these kinds of approaches to the training that you may be wanting to do in the future, or the training you're already doing. Let me see again in your chat box here. Is anybody already doing something with what might be called nano learning, or these very short little videos, or this approach to that? Anybody working with out there? Can you give me a show or anything? Anybody doing that? Not yet. Okay, good. Jen, hopefully you're interested. You'd love to. All right. We'll talk about that. All right. Oh, you use e-learning. Does anybody use micro-learning? Sometimes, we can put it in the category of micro-learning or micro videos. Okay. All right. Well, good. We're going to have a lot of interesting discussion here, I hope. And again, please ask any questions as you go along. I know Melissa said she'd be looking at that, and she'll say, time out, Frank, here's a question if we need to respond to some of your immediate needs. And then I thought what I would do is share some case studies. These are actual clients that we have, or people that we know that are using this approach to nano learning. So you can see some actual examples of that. I will be showing some video today in the PowerPoint presentation. Now, I want to warn you, because of these storm clouds and everything else, you may get a little audio delay. Sometimes that happens when I use Zoom or Teams technology and it's embedded in whatever, but I'll also be giving you links to some of these things so you can see how they work. A link to a Vimeo site where you can see some actual samples of what I'm going to be talking about today. And then we'll get into how to create your own with these tools that I mentioned. And I'm going to go into this really interesting area now. It may be scary, and because we're going through this political voting thing right now, people are concerned about these AI avatars and how we can make them look like, political candidates or whatever, and get them to say. Anyway, we're going to talk about how you can basically take this thing and turn it into something very positive. And I'll show you some examples of that, about artificial intelligence, photars, and avatars, and why that may be a tool you want to explore in the future if you're not already using it. And then finally, we're going to talk about what are the benefits of using this kind of an approach? And then I'll share with you some resources that we have in terms of links to some of these free tools that I use or that you can use, and some of these very low-cost subscription kinds of things that are available to you. And then at the end of the program, I'll open it up if we don't get a lot of questions during the session to basically talk about anything that you want to talk about or get your comments or whatever. So the old trainer in me, and believe me, I've done classroom training, I've done virtual training, started out at a company on Bell Avenue called Massey Ferguson, where I was the head of training for that many, many years ago. Probably most of you are way too young to remember all of that stuff. But anyway, I always remember, you know, it's first thing in the morning and the instructor wants to give a pop quiz. Oh boy, isn't that wonderful? So let's start out here because I want to make a point with this and let's see what your response is. Again, you can respond right here in the chat section if you want to, or you can shout out. What is the most popular website that you guys think today? What do you think the most popular website? Just type it in the chat section if you can. Let me know what it is. YouTube. Okay, it is an extremely, very extremely, popular site. YouTube, Google, YouTube. Okay, look at that. We got a lot of YouTubes. We got a good amount of, let's say, Google in there. Well, let's see what the survey says here. All right, there's some more coming in here. ATD Iowa, I love it. Well, actually, at the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, TikTok was the #1 most visited website in the entire world. And now Google kind of goes back and forth between Google and TikTok. I think Google will say, no, we have one more visit than TikTok does or whatever. But that's kind of interesting to me that the #1 website in the world is now this silly little video kind of thing that we used to think about that's called TikTok. All right, here's another little question. Let's see how you do here. All right. We have these things in our pocket, we use all the time. We call them mobile or cell phones. How often, on average, in the United States, do you think people check their cell phones? I got a lot of C's. I got some D's in there. Look at that. CD. Nobody's saying A. That's kind of interesting. So it must be. All right. Any more? Look at that. Okay, lots of D's. Okay, so let's see what the survey said. Actually, it's even more than that. We check our cell phones every 4 minutes or more. And I think that may, and sometimes during the day, be an underestimate. And have you ever gone into a restaurant and you see 4 people or 2 people sitting at a table and they're both glued to their cell phones or their mobile phones or the new, and also you go in and you see a whole family there, the kids are playing games, the adults are texting back and forth or whatever. So I think that's an interesting statistic and how much we rely on those. And if you look at an average work day during the day, because we probably don't do it at night, that's about 180 times a day that we look at that little handheld device that we have. Okay, here's a really interesting statistic that I found. Over half of Americans have never gone longer than 24 hours without checking their cell phones, without having their cell phones handy. Okay, let's see what it says. If you have an iPhone, launch settings, then tap the screen, see all activity, scroll down. Okay, thank you, Joy. You're sharing here basically information about how many times you can check your cell phone, what the average is, and all that other stuff. Thank you for sharing that. I'll have to check that out when I can, grab that and take a look at it. That's very interesting. Thank you, Joy. Perfect. But we haven't gone more than 24 hours without our phone. So let me ask you this question then. What's your reaction? Has anybody lost their phone recently or misplaced it, maybe for a while, left it at a restaurant, or heaven forbid, we leave it on a phone or someplace where we're traveling? Has anybody lost their phone? Anybody there? Look at that. There's another thing about, so this is one of those little, I modified this little pain scale, that you see at the doctor's office. Give me a shout out here. What would you say if you lost your phone? Would you be like, no problem? Look at this. Here's 10s, 6 4s. It's terrifying. I love it. There's another 10, Debbie, Carol, Penelope, 6. So we got a range here. Let me show you what I often show when somebody loses their cell phone. This is kind of the reaction that I sometimes typically get. It's kind of a panic reaction, right? Here's another one that I feel I get a lot of times. Here's Jen says 10, and I did panic, spent 25 minutes catching catching the school bus. Okay, that's great. That's great. But when I lose mine, I feel like this. I mean, I feel like I'm naked, like something is missing, like maybe my pants or something. I've gone out in public or something without something very, very important. And then the reason I'm sharing all of this is that whether we think about it or not, these little devices have become very, very addictive. And so if I look at Webster's definition of addiction, it's something like, here it is here, a compulsive chronic psychological or physiological need for a habit-forming substance behavior, having harmful physical, psychological, or social effects, and typically causing well-defined symptoms such as anxiety, irritability, tremors, or nausea, et cetera, if we withdraw. Now, I don't know if I lost my cell phone, if I'd throw up, but I do know that it can be very, very nerve-wracking for all of us. And the only reason I'm doing this little quiz is simply to show you that while we've become very dependent upon these devices, and we can look at that as something being very, very negative, in society or whatever, we also have to realize that if we do look at this new generation that's in the workforce now, and the next generation, Generation Alpha, as we call them, basically, they never grew up, or you never grew up with anything that wasn't a smartphone. I love those little, has anybody ever seen those little YouTube videos where they give a young person a rotary dial phone and they hold it and they're looking at it and they don't even know how to, use the dial, they touch the buttons or whatever. So I think what we really come to understand is it's not just Gen Zs though. We all become very dependent upon these devices. And as I said before, when I would start businesses and go out and look at it, I would say, we're becoming very dependent upon these mobile devices. Can we do something? We can look at this and say, oh my gosh, this is a sword, a double-edged sword. And there's a saying that says, we could take those swords and beat them into plowshares and make something out of them that could be very useful. And that's the way I see what's happening with this nano learning technology. I've never been more excited in my lifetime to be involved in training and development or talent development, because we have access to so many new tools now that make it so exciting for all of us to be able to create, be creative, and create learning content. And we never had this opportunity before. So sometimes I describe, when I talk to audiences and groups out there, as training professionals. Have you ever seen somebody go up on a roof? I just had work done on the roof of my house. And the carpenters that were working on the roof or whatever had these big leather aprons on. And that was because they didn't want to keep coming back down to their toolbox, right? So around their waist, they all had these tools right at their disposal. They had a wrench, they had a hammer, they had all of this stuff. Well, I think the same is true with us as talent development professionals. What are the tools, and are there new tools that we could put in that tool belt so that rapidly we could develop content and do it right when it's needed? So you'll hear me, and I have a total bias for this. I'm into empowering people in organizations at the very front line to develop content. And as learning professionals, our job is to help them. So if they're the people that have the content in their head, rather than coming up to develop it and put it all together and use wonderful Adobe tools and all that other, and that's still very, very important. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the people who have the knowledge could actually create that content very rapidly and publish it? Now, maybe we'll curate it and help them become better at it, but that helps us if we can empower people and push that, ability down within the organization. So you'll hear me have a bias for that. And that's where we come into these two types of learning. How many people right now, show me with a little show of hands here, use off-the-shelf content, in other words, content that you might buy in a library for your learners, and then you combine that with content that you've created yourself or you've created on your team? How many people do both of those? Just, can you show me your hands in, or anybody who doesn't do that or whatever? Do you all use both? Occasionally. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Jen. All right. Here's another one. Thumbs up. All right. Thank you, Kelly. That's good. Well, typically in most organizations, people combine it, and there are benefits to both. Off the shelf typically is used when it's a generic topic or you have to use some kind of a subject matter expert that might not be an in-house expert. Maybe that's a best-selling author or a subject matter expert on a particular topic that basically, you may not be able to afford to hire that person individually, but you could get that in an off-the-shelf or generic library. So that's one of the reasons why you can use that. And user-generated content is, I'm sure you're very, very aware, is where you have very organizationally specific information. Maybe it's a policy, maybe it's a procedure, maybe it's, something that is very specific to your organization. I'm going to show you some examples of that. And it really doesn't make sense for a generic producer, for example, to produce something like that, like a LinkedIn Learning or a Skillsoft or Procisions or whatever. So that's what we talk about, combining these two things. And I'll talk a little bit about that. If you have some questions later, we can go over that in a little more detail. But I'm going to be covering both of those. Now, here is our definition, or my definition, of nano learning, because it can be very, very broad. But how we define it a little bit is to really take it into that sort of TikTok, Instagram realm. But I'll talk about other examples too. Now, first of all, several years ago, we got involved in what was called microlearning. And the reason we did that was because of a site out there that you've all talked about, which is called YouTube. And if you remember several years ago when YouTube came on, the average length of a video was about 4 minutes to about 7 minutes on YouTube. Now that it's gotten much shorter, and there's a new feature that they have called YouTube Shorts to compete with TikTok and Instagram. But that really sort of generated this whole idea of microlearning. And microlearning is where you might have short little modules or short little videos that may be anywhere from 4 to 7 minutes in length. Now, when we get down to the nano realm, though, we get even shorter than that. So think TikTok and Instagram. We're really into that realm where it could be under a minute up to about 3 minutes max. Now, I know when you look at Instagram, they're shorter than that. But when we get into the training and development world, really 45 seconds to about 3 minutes is it. We talk about this style, which is TikTok and Instagram. If you watched a lot of these, what do you see in there? When you go to TikTok, can anybody describe what you see typically in a TikTok video? Give me some explanation of what you see in there. What do you like to watch in TikTok videos or Instagram videos? Anything? Don't know if my chat is frozen here or anybody's going to type in or whatever. I watch things that inspire me to try something new. Absolutely. Does anybody out there find these things kind of inspiring? Do we laugh at them? Do we find them entertaining? Okay, food. Absolutely. Dogs. I mean, who doesn't watch the cute dog and kitten videos that are out there? And it can be addictive. You're sitting there swiping. So again, this idea of making them not only short, but try to make them entertaining. There's a good one. Julie's saying, any entertaining, I usually belly laugh, right? So I know when I'm sitting on a couch and my wife is over there and she's laughing out loud and I can see her swipe, I know exactly what she's doing. She's watching TikTok or Instagram videos. Another thing that we see out of this is they're typically portrait framed. In other words, that means that you don't even have to turn your phone to the side. They try to fit it into that, what is called that portrait mode. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. How many people see it when it has the open captioning come up and you can actually read the words? I now find that when I watch movies on TV, I love to have that because sometimes if it's an English movie, even if they're speaking English or Australian or something, I may not understand, but I can read the words down below. And when we talk about accessibility, this becomes important too for people who may not be able to hear or whatever. Another thing is to make it mobile first. You can do different things here. And also, so it doesn't have to just play on the phone. You could play it on your smartphone, you could play it on your tablet or your computer. I mentioned, we now have a library about 500 of these little videos, and early next year, we'll probably have over 1,000 of them. But I'll talk a little bit about our approach, and then we'll get into some tools you can use to create your own, nano learning. Here's just a sample of some of the subjects that we have. And later what I'll be doing is providing a link so you can actually go out to one of our sites and look at some of these and sample them and see the different approaches that, can exist if you want to begin to use either off the shelf or you want to create your own. Now, our approach is one of the things we like to do is use subject matter experts. Here's some of our cadre of those kinds of folks. A lot of these people are best-selling authors. Some of these folks are from Iowa. We've got Kirk here. He's a yoga expert. Here's Cassandra Halls. She's a trainer in Iowa. And then we have some international best speakers or whatever. There's a nice mix of these kinds of people. But I'm going to show you an example in a minute of how you can use some of this stuff and what that looks like. Well, here we are right now. So I want to show you an example. Would you like to see a sample of a video that fits into this Nano model? This is one of our best-selling authors. His name is Taylor Scott. He wrote a book called Lead with Hospitality. And what I want to show you, you'll see over to the right here, he has a series called Serving Hospitality. And what we did, because he has this micro-learning course, is we thought with your Nano version of your videos, what we want to do is, he's really good. He travels all over the world speaking, and he goes into retail, restaurants, travel places, and everything else. And we said, take your little iPhone with you and be a roving reporter and share some stories with people about examples of excellent customer service on the front line. So let me share this with you. Cross your fingers and toes here that we don't have any lag or whatever. We may have a little bit, so don't worry about it. But I'll show you this video right now.
And we think about serving. Think about serving people. It doesn't matter if you have like leadership in your title, right? But people that serve are leaders. Listening to people, enlightening people, being active and accountable, but ultimately the D in lead is delivered. So this is Christopher.
Yes, sir.
Christopher,
Nice meeting you.
right outside of Kingston, Jamaica, moved here, Brooklyn, Syracuse, and I'm in Ithaca, New York, and it snowed overnight. There is no way. I stayed at a hotel in downtown Ithaca, and I'm coming here to the airport, trying to get back home.
Yes, sir.
There is no way.
Safe flight.
No way I could have driven that.
Yeah.
But I said, how are the roads? As soon as we left the hotel, he said, they're all right, but we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. That's delivering.
Yes,
That's
sir.
delivering
Yes,
service
sir.
for
Yes,
people.
sir. Yes, sir.
I appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
LEAD, serve. When you serve people, you lead. Listen, enlighten,
Right.
take action,
Right.
and deliver.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Okay, so hopefully you got a chance to see that. That is one approach where we took one of our authors and subject matter experts, asked him to be a roving reporter, and try to tie that into the content in the training program, which is a micro learning course, but to give these actual examples when he runs into excellent examples of customer service. So hopefully you got it. And you know, that was short. Maybe it's about a minute in length, and you know, very personal. Shot that with his iPhone or whatever. And again, it's to share examples of what's going on. So we have clients, in a minute I'll share with you how they're doing it, but they do the same thing. They make their training videos, their Nano videos, using their mobile phone devices, both to record and even to edit those videos too. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So hopefully, did you find that one interesting? I hope, yeah. So let's go on and let's take a look at another one. Now, here's an international person, and one I want to mention here, it doesn't always have to be a best-selling author. Here is a woman that we're working with. We're creating a leadership development course, and her name is Toni McClellan, and she has a huge following on LinkedIn. And so we're doing a series with her called Compassionate Leadership. But here she's doing a little program and telling a story, which I think is really great use for Nano video, about empowerment. You might see a little lip flap here, but
today I just wanted to share a really quick story about the power within. There were 4 gods and they had some power. They wanted to know where the best place was to hide this power. They said, let's hide it in the loft. No, they'll find it. Let's hide it under the bed. No, that's quite an obvious place. Let's put it in the cupboard. People will look there. So after a few suggestions of where to hide this power, one of them said to the other, I know the greatest place to hide that, where no one's ever going to look. The least obvious place, and it will never be found and it will be safe. And that God said to him, well, where is that? And he said, I'm going to hide it within you. Because that's the last place that anybody looks for anything, within you. Make sure you don't hide from yourself this week, okay? And remember that the power is within.
I have to tell you, I love Tony and her storytelling. She has such a personable way about her doing that sort of thing. But again, you may have a CEO, you may have whoever who is internally and has a lot of experience and stories to share. So one of the things you can do with this nano learning technique, well, like it said, got some goosies. Love her, Jen. Absolutely, she is so wonderful. But again, you have internal stories. Can you imagine if you go to your CEO or your president and you ask her to tell a story that, you know, basically makes your culture come alive? Or can you imagine in onboarding programs where the CEO or the president or the head of your organization or, you know, a senior executive may not be able to participate, but you could use this as a tool to help share stories within the organization. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to some examples about how you can create this kind of content in your own organization. Now, here are some ideas. So did anybody find that helpful and informational about, you know, how you might be able to begin to do some of this? All of these things were done with a phone. One of the most fascinating things I find today is that this little device that we call this mobile phone right here, to get the same quality, like a 4K quality, I used to spend $10,000 for a camera 10 years ago to get that same kind of quality, but today it comes free bundled in. So you don't have to have super sophisticated video production, videographers and everything else. You can create very convincing messages using that little handheld device that you may have access to. So how are people using these kinds of videos? Well, one way we've already talked about is really to reach the next generation of learners. If people like using their mobile devices, they like going to social media, this is a way that we can get better participation. When I talk to a lot of talent development organizations today, they say, I build these beautiful courses, I put them up, you know, pedagogically, they're designed beautifully, but I can't get people to come to them. Well, maybe it isn't the fact, it's the content, it isn't your beautiful work, it just may be the mode of which you're using to deliver that. So that's one thing to consider. You can use it also to reinforce existing training. Many people talked about hybrid learning, talked about how I can do more than just classroom learning. You can reinforce training. Have you ever heard the term, I know you guys know this, and as training development professionals, it's called the forget curve. Remember what the forget curve is? We put this great classroom program together. People come, they're totally motivated, yet a month later, some of the impact of that training goes down, and 2 months later, 3 months later, and before we know it, the impact of that is gone. You can use nano training and nano videos to continue on with that learning, to keep reinforcing that message over and over again. And indeed, what we've done in some of our new curriculum design is to take a micro learning course and then have these nano learning refreshers and reminders that open it up for discussion. So once every 2 weeks or once a month, they're continuing to get the information even after your classroom training is done. Another quick thing here is to reach a wider audience. How many people in here have non-traditional workers that don't always have access to a computer, like a desktop computer or whatever? Does anybody have what we would call sort of the workers that are out in the field, or basically they can't come into a computer to access it? Does anybody have that here? Typically, we find that a majority of people today, yes, here's Carol saying yes, quite a few. That's good, yes. So if you have that group of learners that you may not be able to reach with a traditional learning management system, like, okay, I'm going to go into this site, I'm going to log in, I'm going to put in my password, then I'm going to search the catalog, then I'm going to take the training. These nano modules are so short, it would take you longer to log into the LMS as opposed to taking them. So what we are encouraging people to do is to bypass some of this. If you can load them, they'll play in an LMS, but if you don't do that, you can actually push them by email or push them by text message. So in other words, if you want to get rapid information out, but you don't necessarily need people to log into your learning management system. Nano learning can be a tool to help you do that. So anyway, those are some of the things that we find are some benefits of basically how clients are beginning to use this new technology. Now, I told you I was going to mention some case studies, and I quickly want to do this. And then I'm going to get into some of the tools that you can use to create your own Nano learning modules. We have a client in Southern California. Their name is Extra Urgent Care, and they are growing rapidly. So what basically, instead of going to the emergency room, you would go to one of these, and it's not quite like a minute clinic where they take your temperature. But if you have something serious, but you don't want to go to the emergency room, this is that niche they're filling, and they're growing like gangbusters. Well, you can imagine during the COVID lockdown, the CDC and other regulations, both state and federal, were just hammering these people. And they said, every day we have to send information out, and we have to send training out that's new to our doctors and clinicians and nurses and everything, and people that work in our clinics. And we've got to find a way to rapidly give it out. We can't sit there and take 2 weeks or 2 months to develop this content. And so they started to begin to use this nano learning concept. And let's say there's a new procedure, a new rule that came out, they would create it that morning and it would be published that afternoon. And so they're using nano learning technology to rapidly disseminate information and push information out to their employees using this nano learning concept. We also have another client we work with in Las Vegas, and it's called Captain. And what they're doing is they're electrifying taxis, and they're electrifying the limo service. So their fleets are all electric. And basically what they're trying to do is change the industry in terms of what used to be a fairly standard industry in terms of cabs and limos and things. But one of the things they did to provide a higher level of service and differentiate themselves outside of this green technology is what they wanted to be able to do is provide a higher level of service. So they, instead of having these drivers as contract drivers like Uber and Lyft, what they're doing is they are basically hiring these people. So now when they go to the airport in Las Vegas and they have to wait, because one of their standards is you don't show up on time to pick somebody up at the airport. On time means 20 minutes early. 20 minutes early. And so they're sitting there with 40 to 20 minutes waiting for their customer to arrive at the airport. And so that's downtime they're paying for. So we work with them to start creating their own internal training videos called the Captain Way. And this is one called Go the Extra Mile. But basically what it is now they can take that wasted time where they might play video games on their phone, or they might text or look at TikTok videos that are of kittens and dogs. They can turn that into training time because they can get it right on their mobile device, either their smartphone or their tablet that they're using there. And the final one I'm mentioning here we're looking at is a client that we have that is a large county in Oregon. And what they wanted to do is have some virtual training for their supervisors. And they had a group of people that could be anything from the sheriff's office to people who fight forest fires up Mount Hood and all this other stuff. But they had people who did not have access immediately to their LMS. And so they started sending out these little how to conduct meetings, and they used them as discussion starters, just like in the beginning of the program, when Melissa had us in breakout sessions, they would show these so that they could look at it and have these discussions in their breakout sessions in their virtual training. So they combined this off-the-shelf content and brought it into their own training efforts and energy. So that's another way people are using nano learning. Now I'm going to stop right here and ask if anybody has a question of what I've covered so far, because next we're going to start to get into and talk about some of these tools and examples of what you can use, like artificial intelligence for narration and other things. Any questions that you have down here that I can answer? Or turn on your mic and answer, or any questions you have? Not everyone at once, please. I can only answer one question at a time. All right. Well, we're gonna have some time at the end to answer any questions that you have. So be thinking about that. And if anybody has any questions, write them down and I'll try to answer them at the end. So let's press on here and we'll look at this. This is just a sample you can see right here where we were on site at this Captain in Las Vegas. But one of the things I want you to notice, if I can show you right here, you'll see right here we have this horizontally positioned camera. That's where we're shooting the micro learning version of it. But over here, you see this phone, this iPhone right here. Well, that's the phone I have right here by my desk. That's actually my iPhone. So we shot both. This is I was mentioning, like it's probably an $8,000 camera. This one basically has the same quality of resolution, and we're shooting this in portrait. So if you're thinking of shooting some of your own video and you do this in a professional way, think about maybe putting a camera in a little stand-up like this, and at the same time you're shooting it, you might get 2 for 1. In other words, you get your little nano video along with your regular video too. So it's another little tip that I share with people if you want to do that. Now, this is what I was mentioning I get really excited about. Today, technology has given us so many advances. If you want to get involved, how many people out there produce their own internal training videos? Does anybody produce their own training videos or maybe programs that incorporate videos? Anyone? Yes. Okay, look at this. All right, great. Carol, we have some. Penelope, yes, yes. Okay. So everybody, we've got people who are doing it. Congratulations, great. Sometimes people get intimidated with this. We've created a little nano learning series starring, I won't say who, but his name is Frank. And basically what it does is it's a little training program of LinkedIn nano videos that basically tell you how you can create a training video using nothing but your smartphone. And that includes editing it too. So anyway, I'll give you a link to that after this if you want to take a look at it, because it gives a lot of tips on how you can use the latest technology, which are things like smartphones. Anybody ever use a ring light? You know, years ago, we used to use these big incandescent lights. I was on a shoot one time in Phoenix, Arizona. We had these big lights. We were actually doing a scene in a house, and one of the bulbs blew up and a piece of glass got me. I still have a scar on the top of my head. People don't realize that this LED technology makes everything cool. You can adjust it. I'm using 2 little Walmart lights right here to do my lighting or whatever, and it's so cost effective. How many people have ever used a selfie stick? You can use a selfie stick if you're going to be the narrator. You can walk along and shoot yourself. Seen lots of training videos that way. And here's another thing I'll mention too when we get into the technology part of this, is there is software that I use personally to create my nano videos. It's called V as in Victor, N as in Nancy. I'll have a link to that. It's absolutely free. And I've done video editing for 20 plus years. And I am telling you, that is a powerful program and it works beautifully. After a year of making probably hundreds of videos, I finally upgraded to do the paid portion of it because I was accumulating so many. I do far more than that, but it's absolutely free and it's very powerful. So it's a tool that you should look into. I love it. And I think it's very, very powerful for training videos. Now I want to get into, does anybody out there, if you do, has anybody used any artificial intelligence avatars in their training programs? Has anybody done that yet? I don't see a lot of yeses down there. This is something that's rather cutting edge and rather new. And I'm hoping when we get to the Q&A section, some of you will share your stories and turn on your mic about how you are using, what you're doing with your nano learning and micro learning in your organization. But I'm going to show you some examples now because the technology is now getting good enough and cheap enough for you to use those as potential narrators. Now, I'm going to share a story real quickly with you. Even a few years ago, if we would go back, and I used to do production in Des Moines, Iowa, not few, let's say 30 years ago, you couldn't even do video editing in the town of Des Moines. It had this thing called 1-inch. We had to fly off to Nashville, fly off to New York City or to LA because they had the big editing studios. And when we would shoot, you'd have to rent out a studio. I did a lot of work with all of that. You're talking about costs that could range anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 a finished minute for a training video. Today, using technology like this, I can do that and get that down to maybe less than $100 a finished minute. So let me show you some of this, but these are not real actors. These are actors that you can use using technology. And again, I'll show you some links that you can access to find some of these. But these are people that have been created in avatars. So let me show you a little example again. You might get a little lip flap again because of the slowness of Zoom. But here's what you might be able to do. This is an artificial avatar. And what I like about it is I not only can type in the words and it generates this, I can change the tone and speed of the speaker. I can also change the language. So if she starts out in English, I can then type in the Spanish and French translation. And not only does the sound change, but her lips change too. And you can watch this and see it.
Hello, my name is Mary. I want to show you how I can speak several different languages. Hola, mi nombre es María. Quiero mostrarte cómo puedo hablar varios idiomas diferentes.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Marie. Je veux vous montrer comment je peux parler plusieurs langues différentes.
Okay. So basically, that was all done. I could have done it on my phone, but in this particular instance, I did this one using my laptop computer that I have set up right here. And using a particular application. But remember my story about going to the studio and having to fly out to do editing and everything else? I can now do everything I need to do. I don't even have to hire actors and worry about SAG and all the other kinds of challenges you have in working with talent. I can do it using artificial intelligence. Now, is it absolutely perfect? But it's getting better. And if you've ever looked out there on YouTube, you see this one with Morgan Freeman where he's talking. I don't know if anybody's seen that. If you have, I'll tell you, it's hard to tell him, different from the live Morgan Freeman or whatever. Now, what this does is allows me to be totally creative. I can write the script. I can then upload that in. I can choose the actor I want. I can choose the tone and all this others. I can download that. And that person can become a narrator in my film. I can do it with video. I can do it narration only. All of these options are available. And here's another cool option I want to share with you, just in case you want to
Hello.
take, oops. And that's what's called a photar. So an avatar is where you take someone, like a real picture of someone, and you can make that come alive, and you can make that narrator have different voice qualities, different languages. In this particular instance, a photar, which is another site I use, can take a picture or a painting. So imagine taking somebody from history. So we were going to create a writing course. And in that writing course, who would be a great person in history to teach you about writing? Well, what about William Shakespeare? So here's what we've done by using that technology with artificial intelligence to have William Shakespeare teach you how to write.
Hello, my name is William and I'd like to share some of my writing tips with you today. Write till your ink be dry, and with your tears moist it again, and frame some feeling line that may discover such integrity. Oh, I thought that was very clever, if I don't say so myself. Wait a minute, I did say that in my play, Two Gentlemen of Verona. But that's not the type of writing we'll be talking about. We are going to concentrate on business writing skills. So let's get started.
So anyway, you saw a little bit of that. We have another course created and it stars Ludwig van Beethoven. And if you're familiar with his history, he actually went deaf when he was in his 20s, but he continued to be a great composer. So guess what? We have him teaching listening skills on how to become a better listener. So you can be as creative as you want. But to me, this is so exciting and so fun because as a creative person, I can sit literally at my laptop and create all of this. Not only that, I now can go and do it all on my phone. So let's say I'm sitting at Starbucks and I didn't bring my laptop. I can do everything you see right here and never leave my mobile device if I want to, whether that's a tablet or a mobile phone. Now, because I'm older and it's hard for me to see smaller details or whatever, I still like a larger screen when I do it. But we have lots of examples where you can produce a training video with nothing but your mobile phone. Here, yeah, somebody just said, that's amazing. It is, I love it, so your creativity as a content creator now can be almost limitless in terms of talent. We're getting to the point, and I'll show you in a minute, where this is where you can take a narrator, but I'm waiting for the day where I can take two actors that are going to interact with each other, and it's almost there. And when it does get there, I'll share it with you. So now I can have a supervisor sitting across from an employee having a performance discussion, and they're not really actors in the studio. They're all done with these avatars. How many people out there have used other technology to create nano learning? Like, have any of you used these whiteboard drawing technologies? Some like Doodly or something like that, where you're drawing an image and basically it creates this little animated image for you. I've seen lots of nice little nano videos that use those writing programs. That's good. Brevity is the soul of wit, the Bard. I love it. There's another organization that we've been having discussions with, and they're called Mobile Coach. There's another group out of India that's done the same kind of thing. And what they're doing is using chatbot technology to do training. What Mobile Coach has done is created some courses. But imagine if you have people who are out in the field and you want to teach cybersecurity, and you're going like, wow, how can I teach cybersecurity and nano learning? Well, a way to do it is they basically have examples of phishing attacks that come up on their phone, and they're given a multiple choice. Is this truly a phishing attack? Is it not? And then they have to select that. And they get a series of these, and the bot automatically scores it or whatever. So in essence, what they're doing is using the concept of nano learning, which is the chatbot realm, and they're using this technology to say, here's an example of phishing. Here's an example it's not phishing. Here's it, to try and teach people about how to recognize when phishing attacks can occur. And then it grades it and does all that other stuff. So again, it doesn't just have to be video. You can use animation tools. You can use things like chatbots or whatever. Here's one where I was trying to get close. I'll show it to you. And I know I'm gonna be opening up the questions here in just a second. But we have a series called Back Pocket Videos. And the whole idea behind this is, you've seen the younger generation. A lot of them like to put their cell phones in their back pocket. I have to admit, I've done it myself sometimes too. Just be careful not to sit down. And what we're trying to do is put a little coach in your back pocket. And here's something where we're showing a vignette. Now, in this one, the actors don't have their lips moving. I'm using eLearning Brothers cutout figures to create this, but it's a short little example of, if you're going to give an interview, how would you greet somebody that comes into your lobby the first time you want to introduce yourself to them? So let's do it.
Hi, Summer. My name is Derek. I'm the general manager, and I'm excited to meet you.
Thanks. I'm very excited to be here and talk about the open position.
Great. Let's go to my office and have a conversation. Along the way, I'll also introduce you to some of our team members.
Okay, that would be perfect.
Now that's an example where, again, it's just text. You type it in, and then you pick the narrator that you want, and you do the voiceover with that. And then I used that in conjunction with eLearning Brothers cutout figures and put those in there and added background to it. But I'm telling you, we're probably not very far away where those actors will be able to act just like the narrators we were using, and you'll be able to have interactive scenes where you can have vignettes that look like live actors, or get close and approximate that sort of thing. Whoop. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over just a couple of benefits of this, and then I'll open it up to your questions. So some of the organizational benefits that we see out of this is, you can probably already see this. If I'm sitting here writing the script, choosing the actors, creating all of this stuff and doing all of this, there's a huge cost savings that comes into this. Also, it can make us more agile. We can create things. I mentioned that company, Extra Urgent Care. They can produce content, and almost an hour later, they can publish it and send it out to their audiences. You can increase accessibility and completion rates. When you shorten things down and you make it more convenient for you, completion and access rates go up. There's a lot of research that shows that. It also becomes easier to manage. You can decrease a lot of your administrative burden. And one of the things I say, even though I've had a company that built a huge global learning management system with 4 million users on it, that was called Geo Learning. I have a new site now, it's called Hacking the LMS. And so all I'm trying to say here is, we are at a stage where we need to have more flexibility to push training out and make it convenient for our users. In other words, they're not going to have to, for everything. Now, maybe for mandated training where you want to certify somebody, of course, we're going to still use this technology. But I want to rapidly get information out like that extra urgent care, or I want to get information to my drivers that are waiting for 20 minutes to pick people up. You know, can I do this and can I make it more convenient? And in that sense, I don't want them to have to log in to go to a site or whatever. I want it to be right in their text message. They hit on it and it comes up. Or they would go in basically and it would be in my email. I click on it and it comes up. So that's something that we see happening. And I think it's exciting for all of us and it makes it much more convenient for our learners. Here's this. I will be sending this to you. If you guys just send me your email, I'll make sure these are all the tools that I went over and a little bit more. But I'm happy to have discussions with you about how to apply this. There is some warnings that I have, but I'll go over in a Q&A session with you because some of this technology is so new, you might be frustrated in using it, but I'll give you some tips on how to basically navigate that. So let me do this. Let me open this up for questions. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'd love to have any questions that you have. You can either come on and let me hear you or see you, and I'll answer your questions, or let me type in a question below and I'll answer any questions you may have about this. I know I covered a lot of stuff in about 50 minutes here. Okay, here's some. We will get the PowerPoint and recording sent out. Absolutely, we're going to give you access to all of the stuff. What else do we have? Anybody find some of it interesting? Well, I was going to ask you this. Is anybody, okay, here's something. I struggle with how to get it out and track completion. Okay, I'm going to challenge a little bit here, okay? So I'm going to play devil's advocate. So sometimes it may not be important for us to track completions. And I say that because there are a lot of people that go out and use different kinds of they'll go to YouTube, or some people will give whatever. And while it's great, we want to know that. To me, the most important thing is, especially in short little nuggets of information, isn't it much more important that people get access to it and they use it? So we'd like to know about that, but it's not always important to know, did they complete it? Did we test it? Did they understand it? Did they, and I know that's going against learning, philosophy and everything else. But I also believe that if I have something that's really easy to access right here, if they need to show completions, then why don't I bring them back into my LMS, bring them back into a more formal course or whatever. You can also see with some technologies, you can look at access. So if you have something that's 45 seconds, what's the difference between I accessed it and I really completed it? And afterwards, you can send out a survey and say, how are you using it? Send me stories about how it's helping you, that sort of thing. So in some of this, while completions, we think about it, and again, I built big LMSs that do all of that, we may not always have to look at completion rates. And I know that sounds a little strange or weird. What else? Anybody else have questions? Is anybody doing anything with the short micro or nano learning tools? Are you doing anything now that you can share? Because lots of times I have people saying, we're using it with our customers, we're using it with our employees. Is anybody doing anything that they can share with everybody else here?
We had micro learnings as a part of our LMS, which is Litmus. I work at Athene in West Des Moines.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we had them set up to go out after a training class. I think it was supposed to be delivered post-training, like 3 weeks post-training.
Okay.
We've had some functionality issues with that, but I love the concept. I think it makes perfect sense. The other challenge that we have in addition to the technical issues is time. They get out on the floor, and of course, we all know what happens when they're in production. Their time is really focused on production, so it's hard to pull them back into that learning exercise. But I love the concept. I think it makes perfect sense.
Well, thank you very much. And is that Penelope? Is that was Penelope, right?
That was Julie, but Penelope's
Julie,
on my team.
I'm sorry, Julie.
We'll give it to Penelope.
I heard a theme. I don't.
Yeah, no worries.
So one of the things we're doing as a provider to address that is basically giving you access to these kinds of things to disseminate as you wish. In other words, if you have Litmos, you might be in that technology or whatever. But if you have a library of these things and you could just send it out as a text, or you can send it out as an email, we're opening that up. And in the creation, the easy peasy concept, we're creating those so we get beyond a lot of the intellectual property issues, so you can use them the way you want to. And we're working on new technology where you can do that automatically, so you can send those out. But a lot, not just us, a lot of providers are also running into the same thing. And I think what you're going to see in the future is people opening those systems up that will, even within the LMS, allow you to push that content out and do it easily, so that if you have their cell phone numbers or whatever, and I do understand, but that's the whole idea behind nano learning. The average attention span of a goldfish is what, 9 seconds, and that's what they're saying, new learners are whatever. But if I've got 45 seconds to a minute, I got to be able to find some time to be able to do that. Plus, if it's on my phone, maybe I can do it when I have a break, or maybe I can do it at a different time, that's convenient for me when I have some downtime. I mentioned what was happening, with Captain. So they're doing it because they have that downtime, and those people would just be going to, regular TikTok or whatever. Why not learn at the same time? Because basically you're on the clock for doing those kinds of things. Cool. What else? How's everybody else? Anybody else using some micro learning or things in an interesting way that they can share? Well, if you don't, and if you would like to ask questions later, you can certainly send them to Melissa. You can send them directly to me, and we'll be able to answer your questions. I just want to thank again, Melissa, for given me the opportunity to share a little insanity and crazy ideas of kind of what's happening and where we see the future going. Again, I want to thank Tom Powell. He's always a visionary in training and development, and I refer to him often as a mentor and a colleague to help me grow and challenge me in terms of some crazy ideas that we have that we experiment with. But thank you, Melissa, and thank everybody in the SIG group. You guys are great. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. It's very important.
Thank you so much, Frank, for being with us and going through all this very, very, very interesting stuff. So we appreciate you being here, and thank you. And thanks, everybody. I will make the recording available. I know that there were some people that had trouble getting in, so the recording will go out to those folks as well. So if those are teammates of yours, let them know that as soon as this processes, I'll make sure and make sure the recording's available. So thanks all, and have a wonderful Friday. Frank,
Thank
much
you.
appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.